Hi Year 7s, today we're going to be conducting a video demonstration of 3 flower dissections. We've got 3 different flowers laid out in front of you. I also have the following equipment. We have a hand lens, a chopping board, some scissors, some forceps or tweezers, you might call them, and a scalpel. I'll also be using a microscope as well a bit later on. Okay, so the first flower we're going to dissect today is a rose. We also have an orchid and a camellia flower as well. The sepals, these guys on the back, show a bit closer to your reproductive area of the flower. Okay, so first bits first, we're going to cut this flower in half, and then we will separate the petals and sepals. So obviously we need to be careful using a scalpel or any form of razor blade. So I will hold that carefully there. We're going to do a vertical cut across the top of the flower. Takes a little bit of work to get through the base, but the other parts of the flower are actually pretty easy to cut. Okay, so I'm just going to show you a bit of a close-up there. There's the internal structure and reproductive parts of the flower. And now I'm just going to remove all the petals. So you're looking at it roughly probably about 20 or so petals. Okay, so we've just got to show you a couple more parts of the rose that you need to make note of. So let's see if we can get that vision there. So your yellow section on the outside with the anthers, those pieces running up the top. So the anthers are obviously at the tips, and the filaments, which are these little tubes running up to the anthers, is your filament there as well. So we have obviously the petals, the anthers, the filaments which run up to the which support the anthers. We have the ovary, which is located just here, and the stigma and the style through the middle there, slightly different colours. And that's all the parts you need to make note of in your diagram. Alright guys, so here is a close-up of the edge of one of the rose petals. I've actually got the digital microscope attached to the top of my standard microscope. I'll just turn so you can see it's set up there like so. Mind all the mess in the background, it's just where I've got to work today. So that is basically set up and attached to the laptop. And here is a rose petal. Now, see if I can just move the scope around a little bit. You can actually see there, if I make that a bit more visible to you guys, that is the rose petal itself under high microscopy. So that is currently at 40 times the sight of the human eye. So that rose petal is in fact still got that peachy colour to it, but in this field with this microscope it's coming up as slightly grey, purely just because of the way the light's moving. So inside the petal you can actually see all of the pathways that are used with the transport of things like water and likely cell energy, things like that as well. I couldn't give you the specifics on those, not necessary. We thought that was pretty cool to show you. So that's the tip and the edge of the rose petal. Okay guys, here's a very close-up view a couple of grains of pollen from the rose anthers. That's taken at 400 times the view of a human eye. Okay, so our second flower we have is actually quite a different arrangement in the flower. This is an orchid. This orchid, like basically, most orchids have a similar arrangement in terms of its flower arrangement. So in this one, if you have a look on the back side, there's no identifiable separation in the sepals. Actually, well, what you can see, the base is these three parts here are your sepals, and on the top, these three are your petals. Now, cutting this one open I will do, but I'll probably better to identify what we can see so far before I cut it. So this is our column here, and our anthers are present here. We also have the female parts of the flower actually very difficult to identify from the top here. They're actually present quite deep into the flower. So our ovaries and our ovules are actually right down into the stalk of the flower. We'll give it a cut and we'll see if we can identify those pieces. But we do have the male parts of the flower up the top here. So we have our anthers present right at the top, just this tip here. And obviously, if you'd like to draw a diagram of that flower, I'll just show you the main parts, but obviously that top part would be a good place to start, and we'll cut and separate the rest of it now. So I'm just going to take off the sepals. So there we go. I'm going to remove those two petals. Now this part here is going to be interesting. I might not actually cut this one because it's a very different type of flower. I'm just going to separate those two. Now here, we'll see if I can actually find the ovaries inside the flower stalk. Okay, we're just going to open that up a bit. Now they are not directly visible, but essentially the ovaries, so this little part here probably is your stalk leading down into the branch. So the ovaries are just in here. They're not extremely large or easy to identify, but there is definitely, you can see a running stalk down through there. That is leading to your female part of the ovaries. And obviously the stalk there and the anthers here. So that is your orchid. Okay guys, here is a close-up of the petal from the orchid. If you have a look there, the surface of that petal looks much different to that of the rose petal. It's quite lots of little bumps and ridges all over it. Slightly different colours there. Obviously in grayscale for what you can see, but that is very, very different to the petal, the rose petal. Okay guys, here is a single grain, I hope it's a single grain of pollen from the orchids. This is at the same magnification as the rose, so 400 times. And note that that piece of pollen there looks reasonably larger. I'm just playing around with the focus there to try and get you an idea of what it looks like with different layers. But that is a grain of pollen from the orchid. Okay, for our last dissection we have our camellia flower. Now I'll just bring this up a bit closer. You'll see there's quite a lot of anthers floating around, and a very sort of large volume of petals as well. It actually almost looks like it's multiple flowers, but if you look into the center there, we can actually see our little three. So if I can just point those out. These guys. Just open that up a bit more. So we've got all our anthers are yellow, and our female parts here are in fact pink, and basically very small amount of female parts compared to the anthers, which is obviously the case on most flowers, but visibly so there. So I'm just going to turn it over so you can have a good view. So these are our sepals on the back. You've got 5 of those there, and quite a number of petals. So I'm going to aim to cut this little flower straight down the middle, and we'll see how many. Actually, we'll separate some of these petals first, and the sepals actually. In fact, what I can do is I can actually separate that completely from the back there. Okay, so we actually have our ovary all the way at the bottom there, and this is the stigma here, and our style is at the top there. So I will just leave that one there. It's quite handy just to view that, so I will leave that one there, and we're going to cut a cross section of the rest of the flower. So when you're drawing these guys, you're welcome to draw it separately slightly if you wish, but what I can do now is separate these together, and I'll pair them back up again, and I'll give you a visual of what it would be like if they were all together. That will hopefully mean it's in a better nick than if we had to cut it all together. Okay, so what you can see there is our cross section of our camellia. So we have our anthers at the top, and our petals arranged, sepals at the base, and many anthers in this flower, and our little pink style and stigma there as well. So give your best drawing of that one, and we'll move on to the scope to look at the different parts under microscope. Okay, so here is a close-up of the camellia petal. If you have a look, it's actually showing the red of the petal in this image, which is interesting compared to the others. Obviously it's a much deeper colour, the petal on the camellia. So if you have a look though, I'm just going to play around with the contrast there because it's sort of multi-layered. It's actually got a similar look to the orchid in terms of those little nodules and bumps. Obviously quite red in colour. And there you go, that's at 40 times magnification. Okay, so here's our last microscopic view of the pollen from a camellia. There's 2 grains there. Note that the size a bit similar to the rose, definitely smaller than the orchid, and that is at 400 times as per the other 2 views of the other pollen.